a special place among the then published materials takes the lectures offered in this book. It was delivered to the general esoteric class on January 17, 1940, as stated in the catalogue of lectures by Elena Andreeva, under the title Pressure, Tension and Wisdom. It is the only lecture that was thoroughly revised and edited by the master himself, as an example of a profound work without hastening or delaying. In its perfect timing, it was published in March 1940 as a separate booklet of 46 pages under the title The New Day, with subtitles New Directions in the Conscious Life of Nature and Pressure, Tension. Enlightened Life. Due to the great interest, the first edition of the booklet was sold out and additional 3,000 copies were published. The master wanted the lecture to be translated into English and spread abroad. He gave the task to Vesela Nestrova, one of his devoted students, who did the first translation, but it was not published. However, it is preserved and played its role to trace the way for this publication. Enjoy reading it. A reminiscence. Here is the story of the lecture as it was told by Elena Andreeva, one of the master's students and stenographers, and replayed by Georgy Petkov. When the three women stenographers Pasha Todorova, Elena Andreeva, and Safka Karmidicheva finished the decoding of the lecture after it was spoken by the master, Elena Andreeva went to show it to the master. "Here it is, ready," she said, and began reading it. She stopped from time to time waiting for the master's comments, but the master did not say a word. Elena read it to the end and looked at the master in anticipation. "Leave it, please. I want to review it," he said. In a few days, Elena Andreeva went to the master again and asked about the lecture, but the master replied, "It will stay for some more days." The sister checked 7 times whether the lecture had been finished, and 7 times the master sent her back. When the lecture was finally ready and the 3 stenographers read it, they exclaimed in surprise. It sounded in a completely new way and was the first lecture edited by the master himself. So you have the opportunity to read and contemplate on this lecture today on the cusp of the new day. All misfortunes of a person, home, society, and humankind in the past were caused by the lack of understanding of the external conditions and the internal opportunities. All future bounties and goods of life will come from understanding the external conditions and the internal opportunities. Life that brings wisdom, knowledge that brings light, and freedom that brings truth are a foundation for the new life that is already coming into the world. Justice and good in the consciousness of humankind, when revealed in life, are the manifestation of God's love. Love traces the right way, the way of humankind toward all good achievements. Justice and good in the consciousness of humankind, when revealed in life, are a manifestation of God's love. Love traces the right way, the way of humankind toward all good achievements. Remember this. So the concept of love has been taken away from its roots. People think love just means the Hollywood version of romance. Romance is a tiny, really tiny fraction of what we call love. In this context, what you're gonna listen to in the book, the philosophy given by Peter Deunov, is something that was kind of unheard of in that part of the world, and it's something quite profound when he is trying to teach people to lose yourself. Not lose yourself in terms of completely lose your own connection with your soul, but lose yourself means lose the ego. And the problem with ego is ego will make you do certain things that even the animals will be ashamed of. Although animals are more uh, conscientious as compared to humans in some cases. I refer to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, biggest evidence in the last 100 years, let alone the 1913 and the 1914 fiasco. But we're not going to go into the history of that. We're coming back to the concept of love that's been given in this context, and love can be a concept that you like to process and absorb the intricate complexities of the universe and the galaxies and whatever that exists around us as the conscious being, and being a conscientious creature as compared to a rock or a mountain. Human beings have more conscientiousness as compared to even a monkey or a parrot. Although they can replicate the sounds, some of them can replicate the gait of the human, but they can't really create poetry or complex mathematics or create electronics, right? This notion, this idea, was first made profound by none other than the legendary philosopher called Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali spoke extensively on that. Then we had the other ones in the last century, Heidegger and Jungian philosophies that are still taught. I mean, those philosophies are still taught. The formulas Carl Jung derived vividly in the philosophical and the anthropological societies to define the correct form of human consciousness that operates at its optimal to create a community which is cohesive and more observant and more cognizant and more, I would say, to use the buzzword green, means more environmental friendly, not just towards other humans or animals, but also to look after the inanimate objects, which is also a legal obligation. For example, why would you kick a pebble off if it's resting in its place on the side somewhere? Why? Because there are certain microbial animals, I would call them animals because let's put it this way, humans a different conscientiousness, then you have a category of animals. They can move around, they eat, they have some form of free will. But then you have plants and trees that cannot really move as compared to animals, which is also insects and birds and fish and anything that can crawl, fly, walk, run, climb, move with their own free will. That is an animal, an object. And these thoughts are put together quite firmly by Al-Ghazali. That's another story for another day, but when listening to or reading to Peter Deunov, we find the similar ideologies that are found in Abrahamic faith. All of them. Why? Because you'll find that in this journey, a lot of philosophers came from some form of foundations, that those foundations that are rooted deeply and heavily in some form of Abrahamic theological doctrine, whether it's the Old Testament, the New Testament, or within those testaments you have certain books, call them certain chapters, or certain ideologies. And those ideologies create an archetype, and that archetype is followed by the person who is following certain form of course to create a discourse with him or herself. Means removing the ego, the egotistic mind, and leading from this, the bigger processing unit. If it doesn't exist, the brain can't get your blood supply, and your lungs can't process the blood if heart is not pumping it. Now, medically speaking, heart cannot just pump the blood and do nothing. That's it. It's a wrong definition. If you take the holistic approach, if the heart is not beating, well, by the way, the only organ that has a spiral shape, and it's connected to the entire human body, the nervous system, which will in return makes us who we are. If there's no blood supply, if the heart is not beating, the human being is not a human being. Beating heart means the blood is being sent to all the vital organs and also the main secondary organs, and then you have your tertiary organs and the senses. So if you look at it, heart is the primary engine that keeps us moving, and it makes more sense because heart is the only organ that is shaped like a spiral. You can stretch the heart muscle out and it will become like a straight sheet, and if you fold it, it can be folded exactly into a spiral, a cone, which makes the mathematicians wonder, as every single thing that has information in it, it's shaped in a spiral. Even on the subatomic levels, you have the electrons moving around the nucleus, you have the atoms moving around the molecules, then you have the planets moving around the sun is moving around the galaxies, you have the spirals here on the the fingertips, spirals, spiral, all of the information sensory units are composed of spirals. It takes the information in and puts it back out into another form, another dimension, call it whatever you like. But the essence is love to bring information in, process it without ego, and then act upon the perceived emotions, the perceived realities that you process in after taking the information inwards, and then you produce something more profound outwardly to help the communities around you. And that also includes, like I said, plants and animals and also inanimate objects. If you kick a pebble, there'll be some insects living on that pebble. You're gonna kick it, you're gonna displace the sustenance of that insect that's been living there for God knows how long. By just kicking it, you will dismantle the entire ecosystem. Same thing if you start kicking around or randomly chopping the trees off. You are disorienting and dismantling the nature's playground. Everything is a closed loop. We as human beings have limited scope. We can't even see beyond our visual spectrum. And that's tiny. Bats, rats, dogs, cats can see better. An eagle, a hawk, can see 500 times better than humans. I'm speaking metaphorically. And all of these notions were put together in the philosophical connotations by great philosophers whom we just discussed. So if heart is processing the information like a spiral, it's keeping every single thing alive. And if it's pumping the blood, it's making the senses work. So heart is the most conscientious creature inside the conscientious beings. For example, humans. Now, it comes at a responsibility. If you have the ability to process information, take it inwardly, process it, and push it out there. If you're doing that, it means you have been given unlimited powers. Like we discussed, a cat and a rat or a bat cannot do it. So if a human being has the ability to use all the skills that human being has in order to create something that's going to be helpful and beneficial for the community, we should do it. And this is why a lot of teachers from different parts, walks of life, came to teach in their own specific tones. But they had one thing in common, which is they were operating from the same essence. Take the information in, ignore your ego, completely try to crucify it, and then come back to the reality, and you will see things differently. And that's the point we have made in this section of the book that we are reading, The New Day. So, on to the next one.